there, and welcome to Snapshot! Not too long ago, I made a video talking all about how Epic ruined Fortnite machinima, and in it, I mentioned how their finagling was the root cause of my own series, Shadows Rising, being canned. Today I want to talk about what was actually going to happen in the story, how it was going to relate to things from the actual Fortnite storyline, and the strong inspiration it took from other large series. So, if you've been wondering why there's only 4 episodes of that up on my channel, you're about to find out now. So, let's get into it! I want to start out by explaining how the series came to be. Now, this video is going to be very loosely scripted, and by that I mean I have a full script, but I'm already going off of it. So you can be certain I'm going to go very off track through the rest of it, so bear with me here. The series began for pretty simple reasons, those being, well, I loved Newscape Pro series for a very, very long time. And given my historically broad creative interests that can't seem to stay in one place, I came to the conclusion that OG was the perfect time to start, which honestly, it probably was. Familiar locations would allow me to bring back old skins without the expected, "Why aren't the new guys here?" questions. I sort of started without any real plan. All I knew is that I wanted Kato Thorn to be the main villain, because I mean, given where the actual Fortnite storyline and short films creators were at the time, it made perfect sense. He was given just enough characterization by Epic for me to have a strong starting point for his personality and what he'd do, and nobody else had really used him because all the other short film creators had quit by then. He's also just a pretty cool skin in my opinion. I mean, look at him. Look at him and tell me he's not cool. I figured having him going back in time was a pretty neat idea, and shot that first scene of him appearing without any real plan. The start of the series was actually so poorly imagined that I even swapped voice changers for his vampiric form in the same 12-minute video! Bit of trivia on that actually real quick, because it's a fun story. I was using the built-in Deep Man voice changer of the Power Director mobile app at the start of the episode. That simple deep voice was just sorta not really fitting, but I didn't know of anything better when I recorded it. That changed when I started looking for better options for later parts of the episode, which is when I found the voicechanger.io website. It is genuinely a really cool resource, and I am very happy with how Ultima Knight's voice came out. We'll get back to him in a moment. Either way, by the end of the episode and the second Kato scene happens, I was still going to use the original filter, but my 4 gigabytes of RAM having Chromebook decided it didn't like that and wouldn't properly apply the filter to Kato's longer lines. So I just jumped over to Voice Changer and made the voice you hear now during his final fight with the Ageless, which I'll show the specifics of on screen now. It's shockingly simple, just the ghost reverb that adds that wispy supernatural sound, and a small pitch shift to lower my naturally high-pitched voice down to be slightly more menacing, though I don't know if he's exactly frightening, but I do like the voice. The voice I use for recording it is also pretty much what you hear when he doesn't have the filter on, and I'm not particularly proud of it, to be honest. That's why he has it in episode 4, even though he isn't in that form. I even tried to add a reason for it. It wasn't changed at the start of episode 1, though, simply because I didn't think to go back and change it, which comes off as sloppy and kinda lazy now that I watch it back. And God, his voice without the changer is awful. I should have given him a way more interesting voice, but what am I gonna do about it now, you know? I've gotten majorly off track, though. After getting Kato's setup scene, I knew I wanted to use Ultima Knight. He was used by other stories in general, but they never really used his red style, especially not the default red Ultima style. That's when the idea of him being a snapshot of another Ultima came into my head, hence his confusion early on. I also loved NSP's shots of him flying with Steelwing, and I knew I wanted some of those as well, and I decided to carry on his connection to Oro that Newscape Pro started. His personality isn't really shown in episode 1, but I thought it would be interesting if this Ultima was a darker version of the original. Again, something I'll get to later. His part ends pretty open-ended, but a lot of questions were cleared up in episode 3. The next part is our introduction to Enforcer, a character I wanted to use since neither Little Lizard or Newscape Pro really used him in a way that was super satisfying, at least in my opinion. I love Newscape Pro Enforcer. I think his early rivalry with John Wick is cool, and like him being like the harbinger of the cube is very neat, and how they kind of tied that back around into the storyline. But to say the least, I think that having a proper Enforcer, how Fortnite intended Enforcer to be, was a very fun idea. Now, while the whole first episode was mostly just me piecing random fun-sounding ideas together, Enforcer was actually planned out. His whole part is very heavily military-coded, and words are exchanged constantly between him and a voice he refers to as Command. This part does have inspiration I can point to as well, that being the TVA from the Loki series and Control from RVB Season 11 to 13. I'll talk more about what was going to be the Time Enforcement Operations, or TEO, later, but all you really need to know is that they were the Time Police, essentially. Enforcer is sent to find and eliminate variants of Ultima Knight, Kato Thorn, and Red Knight. Red Knight is the name Command speaks in reverse at first, which was sort of my fun way of hiding who he was actually about to find. The Red Knight variant would turn out to be Spectra Knight, an actual time variant of Red Knight similar to the way Ultima is. Another connection I'll explain later. Either way, he finds her and she gets away after a fight. Finally, we cut back to Kato, who happens upon the soon-to-be main character of the series, the Ageless. I decided toward the end of making episode 1 that the Ageless was going to be the main focus of the series, that most events would be seen through his eyes. Kato at first fights the Ageless, and also gives one of the cringiest ways I've ever spoken words. Like, seriously, what is the way I say face an unaging Lord of Time? It genuinely sucks, because this could have been an aura moment for him.
Self. You sound as if you are mocking me, traveler. I will tell you I will not suffer your insolence. Yeah! Ugh! You have power, I will give you that. But it is not the power that I have. Feast your eyes on an unaging Lord of Time!
You would dare take on a revenant such as myself?
After a lengthy and pretty fun battle, Kato wins, and beckons the Ageless to join him, ending the episode with a line I'm still kinda proud of.
Time is like a river flowing down a hill. It is fast and will push anything on it. But with a strong enough push, you can go backwards up it.
Now, I'll be the first to admit, the series definitely could have done with a few more episodes before Ageless turns against Kato, since we don't see the poor behavior the Ageless mentions him having in episode 3. But it all leads into episode 4, where the Ice King explains many of the questions regarding what is happening in the story. I recommend watching that video just for the explanations, but I'll summarize here. Most of the mechanics are taken from the actual Fortnite storyline, like snapshots and realities. Rather than being sent back in time like everyone thought they were, Kato's time machine actually brought everyone back to Reality Zero, the first reality. And rather than going back in time to the far past of Reality Zero, it brought the past to the future. It's still technically modern day, just with the world changed to how it used to be. It also ripped beings originally from or closely related to Reality Zero back to it. The Ice King explains that he is the original Ice King, literally the first one there ever was. It's then said that when the original version of people left Reality Zero, they left a snapshot behind in their place and created a new one in a new reality. So when R0 Ultima left, a new Ultima Knight was left behind, and a new one was created in a different reality. We'll call our Ultima Knight R2 Ultima Knight, or Reality 2 Ultima Knight, making him the one that was created in a different reality when R0 Ultima left Reality Zero. The Ageless explained a good amount of how snapshots work and is already aware that he's R2 Ageless, or more accurately, R2 Geno. No surprise, he's the snapshot of Geno. The only real questions not answered are where Spectra came from, what's going on with Teo, and who Kato is a snapshot of. The first one was obviously not answered, since none of these three even know she exists. For the second, the Ice King knows what Teo is, he just doesn't know that they're actually involved with anything going on currently. And the third is alluded to, but never actually said, which is where we're going to begin talking about what was going to happen in episodes 5 and 6. Episode 5 was going to start where 2 left off, focusing on Enforcer stumbling away from Loot Lake and being found by Bright Hunter, a fellow Teo agent. He was going to be jokey and fun, and Enforcer's closest friend. They would then call in a chopper and leave. We then cut to Ultima scouting Kato's base. He'd be ambushed by Enforcer while doing it, and after a small fight, they'd come to an understanding that Kato was the true villain at the heart of everything that was happening. None of the other variants wanted to be here, they were pulled here. The episode would continue with them meeting Spectra Knight, and it being revealed that she was actually from reality 2, same as our Ultima Knight that we are watching throughout the series. She was even one of his head knights in his order, and it's here that the darker side of him would truly be shown. Ultima had killed his brother, who would have used the Silver Ultima style. The Silver Ultima was the R2 version of Black Knight, and he had plotted to usurp Ultima's kingdom. Although justified, Ultima would feel a lot of guilt over this act and exile himself, hence the mention of his prison by Oro. We would then cut to more of the Ice King and the Ageless talking about what happened to Geno in Reality Zero. After a short conversation, Ultima would return with Spectra, Enforcer, and Bright Hunter. A short discussion would happen, ending with a cut to Kato overlooking his machine. He would talk for a moment about what was to come and about Geno before the episode would end. Episode 6 would have opened with Kato commanding the Kobolds to defend the base from anything that threatened them before cutting to the Ice King, thawing and pulling the Infinity Blade from its place and telling everyone that the time had come. A weak spot had been found, and the attack was about to begin. Enforcer would call into command to requisition anything they have, and then the battle would start. After a lot of fighting, the group would stumble upon the lab and the Biohazard Project, a plot point intended for the future since this episode had been planned after Chapter 5 had started. In fact, it was already Season 2. Either way, the Ice King would take on Kato and lose, being knocked to the lower levels where he'd pass the Infinity Blade to the Ageless, who would charge Kato, taking him by surprise and pushing him through the glass window at the back of the base. After both fell to the ground, Kato would seemingly be defeated, and a short conversation would take place where Kato finally drops the bomb. He is a Geno snapshot! Not just a Geno snapshot, though, but R1 Geno, the one that was left behind when the original Geno left Reality Zero. This momentarily stuns the Ageless while Kato continues to explain that he was left in a world that hated him, and that he was going to change it. He was then banished by the Elemental Kings, hence him being in other realities most of the time. The Ageless would finally snap out of it and tell Kato he lost, only for Kato to suggest the opposite. He was merely biting for time. The machine had already been activated, and there was no stopping it now. Kato would laugh before everything fades to white, revealing the Ageless, Ultima, and the Ice King in a white void. Ageless would ask the Ice King why he didn't tell him that Kato was R1 Geno, practically the closest thing he has to a brother, to which the Ice King would reply that if Ageless had known, he may not have gone through with fighting Kato. He knew from his own experience how much emotions could stop one from doing what needed to be done. His line in episode 4 about how knowing who Kato was could have effects on some individuals was indirectly alluding to this. After a while of standing in the void, Wukong would appear. While Wukong isn't meant to be actual Wukong in a mythological sense, this Wukong was once one of the Ice King's allies in Reality Zero, before he was given godlike powers and left the loop entirely. Wukong comes to tell them that while he can do nothing to fix what has already happened, he may be able to grant each of them a wish for how the new reality will look. Ultima and the Ageless wish for their domains to be brought into the new world, while the Ice King simply wishes for the Polar Peak Island to be brought over so the Fire King can't escape. The scene would fade over and we'd see Enforcer and Bright Hunter talking about what happened and how Command was not going to be happy. Enforcer would then get a call from Command informing him that while Reality Zero was experiencing weird fluctuations, it seemed like everything was starting to come together again, and that they'd need all of the data his sensors had collected. The last part of the episode would be a cut to Kato, in the void, asking questions about what he had done, and whether or not it was actually the right choice, giving a window into his mind that we haven't really gotten yet. Wukong would then appear and ask Kato if he wishes for anything. Kato reasons for a moment, asking if he deserves to be given a wish, and after a few moments of conversation, Kato is convinced, and answers that he wants his memories of Reality Zero and of Geno himself wiped. He wants to start over, but knows he can't while he still remembers why he started. Wukong would ask if that's really what he wants, to forget who he really is, that he could truly do better even knowing everything he's done. But Kato confirms that this is what he really wants, and Wukong obliges and informs Kato that the second he's thrown into the new reality, he will forget everything. The scene would fade to black and reopen on the new map with the Ice King, the Ageless, and Ultima looking over everything that changed, before we see Kato exploring, trying to figure out how he got here since he literally doesn't remember. And that ends the actually planned episodes and what was going to happen in them. But that's not where the ideas for the future end. So let's talk about where the story was likely to go. The Ageless would remain a main character with many knights that follow his leadership, including the Shredder. Yeah, you remember how I said Chapter 5 had already started by the time I was workshopping where the series would go? Well, the TMNT event had already started, and Shredder was my favorite skin. Probably of all Chapter 5 Season 1, to the point I wanted him to be a mainstay in the series. He would have been the Ageless's best warrior on the island, and the one he sends to meet with the Society, specifically Valeria, who would be the leader of the Society in this version of events. Now, by the time I got to coming up with that, Season 2 had already started, which would have been a benefit and would not have been the Society's fault. Rather, Teo would have discovered Zeus's lightning, causing the Greek gods to come to the island. Now, I never figured out the specifics, but Kato would return and battle Ares, and while he loses, he learns that the god of war could make a strong ally. The Ageless, the Society, and the gods would eventually come to blows over Teo not returning the lightning, and the Shredder would seemingly die in a cave-in. This is where the biohazard project from Kato's base would come into play. When the reality went through its shift, the project would end up being concentrated in this cave, leading to Shredder turning into Super Shredder and joining the Society in this awesome, you thought I was dead, but I still live moment, I had that awesome return plan, and I never got to use it, but man, it would have been cool. There also would have been a subplot where Zeus casts Ares out for failing him, leading to the god of war joining the Ageless. Kato would have continued wandering for a while before circumstances would eventually lead him to joining with the Ageless as well. This plotline would have lasted for quite a while, with Shredder as the main adversary before he would be slowly phased into a recurring villain that would appear from time to time. Zeus would then take center stage, requiring the aid of Hades to finally be defeated. But the storyline that would go down never ended up materializing. And that just about explains everything that I had planned, but never really got into. But I did say I'd give you some insight onto Teo before this video was over. As I already said, Teo was heavily inspired by the TVA in Loki, but they changed a lot in the time between episode 1 and when I was going to continue the series. The first episode plays hard into them just being the TVA, but I ended up settling on the idea of them trying to send snapshots back to their realities. This, unfortunately, would create a lot of continuity errors with episode 1 that I realized while writing this, as it stated that Command just doesn't know Kato Thorne at this point, which this line creates a weird flow with how the series would have continued, and shows how little I planned since they absolutely should know who Kato is. Worse, episode 1 uses the original idea of these episodes taking place in the past and potentially causing conflicts with the modern day, rather than the later concept of the past being brought to the present. They just should have known Kato as a Geno snapshot, since he was the one that was left behind. And he also shouldn't have been grouped with Ultima and Spectra, since he's from Reality Zero. It just should have been a bigger deal to them than it actually was. In the end, I think Shadows Rising could have had potential if Epic had chosen to keep Creative Royale, but as it stands, I just simply don't think it's feasible to make a series at the scale I wanted to anymore. But with that, we've come to the end of this video, so if you have enjoyed, consider hitting the like button down below because it tells me that you like the video. And if you like what I do and you want more of it, consider subscribing for more. And if you want to know whenever I upload, whether it's this or anything else, you can ring the little bell to get notified whenever I do so. With that, I will see you all next time.